I'm with Elana Heideman from Israel Forever Foundation, and we're talking about Tisha B'Av. Now, Elana, what is Tisha B'Av?
Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for having me at this very special time of year. Tisha B'Av is the ninth of the Hebrew month of Av, and it is one of the most important days of history and days of catastrophe of the Jewish nation. It was the day where the first and second temples were destroyed that once stood on the Temple Mount as it is known today, and it has been known for 2,000 years, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where today stands the Golden Dome, and nearby what is known as the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This used to be the home of the holy Jewish temples during the time of peace throughout the land of Israel. On Tisha B'Av, twice in history, our temples were destroyed by different armies who came and pillaged the Jewish ritual and traditional objects of holiness, and they destroyed the entirety of Jerusalem. They exiled the Jews from their homes. They murdered and they pillaged. And on Tisha B'Av throughout history, many people throughout the lands around the world have used this day as a day to bring about continued catastrophe before the Holocaust, during the Holocaust, and even today. Many times, Jewish historical events like this ninth day of the month of Av, this day of mourning, they use it as a day to create new pain. So it is indeed a very powerful day, and one that brings us to very unique styles of observance.
A very sad time to lose the first temple and the second temple. It does actually remind us that Israel does have a history in the land and on the Temple Mount as well. You were kicked out of the land twice. You went through a Holocaust, expulsions, and yet you're back in the land today. You didn't assimilate into society. You came back in 1945, 1948. Is that the miracle amongst all the sadness?
Well, it's interesting because it didn't begin in 1948 on May 14th, what we recognize as Declaration Day. It began hundreds of years earlier when there were many different movements for the return of the Jewish nation to Jerusalem. And part of the reason that the movements were always a thread of Jewish identity was because the temple in Jerusalem was so central to every Jewish identity in every Jewish community in exile around the world. Under our wedding canopies, we smash a glass and we remember the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of our temples. We remember it on our happiest moments and, of course, on our saddest days. We know that even today, what the battles that we're fighting are a part of this continued battle that the world seeks to destroy and erase the Jews. So, what we know is the Jew will continue to survive. And it's because of the very same faith that we expressed then 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. And it's been such a part of our identity because there are also these traditions, as I mentioned, that we practice. Tisha B'Av, the ninth of Av, is a fast day. And there are certain readings from the Torah, from the Bible, that from the writings throughout history that we read, words of mourning, words of connection, longing for the temple. This was our heart and soul. And I will tell you that if people truly understood Judaism and the centrality of the Temple Mount and Jerusalem to who we are, and the beauty of our prayers for Jerusalem, im eshkachech Yerushalayim, tishkach yamini, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may I lose my right hand, and it continues, may my tongue cleave to the top of my mouth. It was so essential. Jerusalem was the soul and continues to be the soul of what it is to be a Jew, because that is where God's judgment was being fulfilled, where our service to the Lord was being practiced by our priests called the Kohanim. And these are the fighters, the people who on the destructive days then they then echoed through history, so that when it was during the Holocaust, and when we were faced with pogrom, and when we are faced with terror attacks and suicide bombers, we or anti-Semites screaming lies at us everywhere in the world, it's the same strength of those people who said, in spite of this destruction, we will outlast. And that's what drives the Jewish people forward. That's why we are still fighting the same fight for Jewish existence. We are still fasting as our ancestors did 2,000 years. And we are still recognizing that we must educate ourselves, our children, and the world to the goodness of God and what Judaism means, what it can mean to our people and to all of humanity. So Tisha B'Av is a day where we mourn deeply, but then we rise up, and it is hope that saves us. It is hope that drives us forward and says, now we will keep going.
Israel has had many days of mourning recently. October the 7th, soldiers have been killed, some of the hostages were killed. There's been sadness and pain, and yet Israel aren't safe all around the world. So there's still even more sadness seeing the way the world responds to Israel, isn't there?
I think it's beyond sadness, the way the world responds to Israel. I think that it is truly appalling to see how how everything has turned into a demonization of Israel, Judea, in every possible shape and form. And so our memorial days, which are really, yes, they are plenty, and they are meaningful, and each one has different styles of expression, which we even have, like you mentioned, October 7th. So we are now immersed in trying to build, what will these memorial days look like? We have the experience because of establishing memorial style for the last 80 years since the Holocaust. And we, if I might say so, as a Holocaust scholar for all of my life, we have become very good at remembering. But as a recent book that was published says so eloquently, people love dead Jews. And so therefore, these memorial days are ways that people can express sorrow without drawing a connection to how it relates to the current hate being expressed against Jews. Because there is so much more that can be done to re-educate whole societies, and beginning with our own children in families and in small groups at schools and in communities. That is how we can remind people that what they're hearing about Jews in Israel are based on the very same lies that led to the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jewish civilization in the ancestral Jewish homeland, the destruction of Jewish memory and our connection to this homeland. I mean, if you can believe it, the United Nations, once a beacon of human rights, has actually become the biggest advocate for the lies and libels about Israel and Jews, claiming that Jews have no connection to Jerusalem. Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is a day of evidence that refutes any such claim in any such court of legal or public opinion. Why? Because we know the evidence is there. If you walk in the streets of Jerusalem, the evidence of the first temple is there. The evidence of the second temple is there. We have just discovered very recently more and more artifacts. It's incredible because Israel is determined to provide this evidence to the world. And one of the reasons is we know that in future generations, just as we said about the Holocaust, they will come and try to claim it never happened. They will claim it is not true. And we know that that is the case about the Jewish connection with Jerusalem. When Napoleon arrived in Vilna, Lithuania, he witnessed the Jewish community weeping, as we do on Tisha B'Av night. So on the Jewish calendar, our days essentially begin at nightfall. When the sun sets, the next day begins. So the 9th of Av begins on sundown next Wednesday. And the July, what's the date? I apologize. Next Wednesday July 22nd, right? Sorry for the mishap.
Yes, 22nd, yeah.
Yes, the 22nd. So, the fast begins on the evening. We fast throughout the night and throughout the next day. But at that night, people go on pilgrimage to the old city of Jerusalem. Some people actually go to other sites throughout the land that were connected to temple times and to the communities that lived here in the land of Israel for thousands and thousands of years. Even, by the way, in spite of the exile, there is evidence of Jewish presence in the land of Israel ever since the destruction at the very beginning of time, meaning when the Jews came from the Exodus from Egypt and they entered into the land, and with God's blessing, they conquered the land. And that there is, after that, the practice is often continued. And so we see many elements of evidence that the practices that took place in these remnant communities. And so many people go to pilgrimage sites all throughout the land, but it is Jerusalem that holds our heart. And so we read the Lamentations, the book of Lamentations, and we have this spiritual reconnection with Jerusalem that is more than just a connection with a city. It's a connection with everything that Yerushalem, the name of the city, that it shall be complete once the presence of God is there. And who brings the presence of God to the city of Jerusalem? Only the Jewish nation. They bring the holiness to the land of Canaan through their conquering. And they say, this is the land of God, the land of Zion, where from Zion shall come forth Torah, ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. And then that Torah can bring goodness amongst all mankind. And so really when we honor Tisha B'Av, we're honoring not only the destruction and creating out of it memory, we're doing meaning. So to connect the ideas I just shared, yes, we are doing that for October 7th. Yes, we've done that with the Holocaust. We've even made sure that the memory of the destruction of the Jews from Arabian lands, who most people do not realize were persecuted many different times throughout history and were exiled again and again and stripped of all of their belongings and all of their livelihood. They were kicked out of their homes again and again, the Jews in Arab lands, most of whom now do not have Jewish communities any longer, even though they were the first sites of Jewish communities after the exile from Jerusalem. So we look through all of this memory and we say, what can we do with it? And that's where we come to today. So today is the new month of Av. We've just started this new month, and we have 9 days where we don't swim, those who are observant of all of the laws. We don't swim. We don't take leisurely showers because we know that, and it, by the way, began 3 weeks before the 9th of Av. 3 weeks earlier, our mourning period begins. There are people who don't dress a certain way. We don't have celebrations. From the beginning of the month of Av, there's no weddings, no live music. Again, this is for the observant communities. And amongst the Jewish people, we have religious and non, and people who are just traditional, who do a little of this and a little of that. Judaism is a beautiful people, and that Jewishness is a beautiful thing in that way. And so we don't allow ourselves to be so celebratory that we forget that even in the weeks before the complete destruction of the temple, we were fighting. We were fighting for our lives. Our women were being raped and our children were being burned. Our men were being killed. Our civilization was being destroyed because they tried to erase the Jew. As again today, every Memorial Day is a reminder of the attempt that continues in every generation to erase the Jews. And we have to make sure that memory always has a purpose, to reaffirm the justness and the need for Jewish survival.
It's sad for the Jews. It's also sad for the Christians. What's happening today? We're seeing Kairos too, where the Church of England is basically embracing Palestine and basically forgetting the Bible, what the Bible says in the book of Genesis, I will give you this land as an eternal covenant. We've seen with all the hate, Zionists not welcome, put the Zios in the ground, death to the IDF. Have we actually learned anything about the Holocaust?
No, nothing. There are those who have, and that's who we have to rely on. But the majority of people have distorted the messages and the lessons that we could learn from the Holocaust. They've made them de-Judaized. If you take the Jew out of the story, it's more palpable to the common person. In doing so, they've basically stripped the Jew of respect in the eyes of the people. So they have now started to believe that, oh, wait a second, there is a logic to why Hitler decided to kill all the Jews. They believe that there is a logic and that it is okay to resist Jewish existence by rape and murder and kidnapping. All of the legitimizing of terror is simply, and unfortunately, okay, but it is simply a result of poor Holocaust education, of people trying to minimize the degree of what took place. And I will tell you, part of the reason that Holocaust denial, and it is a form of denial, in my opinion, distortion, diminishment, these have been set in the practice of Holocaust education as like the rules by which everybody must abide, right? That we have to teach the Holocaust with integrity. We have to prevent diminishment of truth. Unfortunately, we're seeing it so prevalent now that people don't even know the truth of the Holocaust. People are denying that it took place. They're denying the anti-Semitism of 20 years that led up to common involvement in murder, outright murder, open in streets. And we are starting to see these trends repeat themselves in our own societies today. But those societies are incapacitated, even our police forces. They are incapacitated against the enemy. If you saw I saw a video recently of the London police, they basically had to run from the rioters to save themselves. So what will happen next when more and more are empowered by, such as you mentioned, the situation with King Charles? It is very much, it's the mentality of appeasement. And it's a danger with the caliphate that is attempting to be built right now throughout the Arab world. People have been so focused on first Gaza and siding with Hamas and, poor Palestinians, if you'll forgive me. I mean, no disrespect to humanity, but a society that enables that terror reality is a society that bears some responsibility, and the same then became true as the world's attention was shifted. It became Iran, and it became Lebanon and Hezbollah. Now they're embracing Hezbollah, and they're embracing the Khomeini, people who are responsible for the death of millions of people and the continued desire to kill millions of people. And so what we have, though, is this need to criticize Israel, and yet not think, how do you stop these trends from continuing? Because who are we going to pay attention to next? Next on the board, of course, London, everything that's happening there, and what's happening in America. The Christian community, to go to the source of your question, is ultimately going to be a victim, because too many are not rising up, because they do not see themselves as the target of what is building around them. It's too easy in our lives to just say, I'm just going to live my life. Maybe I'll like a few posts. Maybe I'll share an article or two. But we're not responsible for the re-education. We can't do anything. And that's really the truth about how people feel, again, even about King Charles welcoming more the Islamist approach to society than the Christian background that he represents of generations before him. So the Christians in Nigeria who are being murdered openly, there are endless videos being shared. Nobody cares. Nobody listens. Nobody is rioting. You have millions and millions of Christians around the world who could be doing more to shout out for the rights of the Christians. But instead, they're trying to figure out how they can blame the Jews, blame Israel, and chant from the river to the sea. That is their code of acceptance. And therefore they can deny the danger that exists for the Christians of the world. We as Jews, however, we as Israel, we do not deny it. And our fight in Lebanon, for example, should be understood by anyone listening as a fight for the rights of the Christian community of Lebanon, who has suffered endlessly under the terroristic hand funded and led by Iran and the face of Hezbollah. It is the Lebanese people who were a Christian majority until terror took over. And so we must think of those communities and we must say, you know, who is fighting for them? Because it is only Israel. Only Israel is fighting for the rights of the Druze in Syria, using our minimal forces to be able to help them defend themselves, coming to the aid of the Yazidi, coming to the aid of the Kurds, any people who are attacked. Who is there? It is the Jews. It is Israel. It is our army and our air force, our young men and women who put ourselves on the line. There's this amazing Israeli song that says your plumber, your grocery store, helper, your driver, your cab driver, your bus driver, you're this, you're that. We are all heroes ready to save the world. Israel continues 2,000 years ago and today to be a part of what it means to save the world. Christian, Druze, Yazidi, and if I may say, even to save perhaps Muslims from the Islamists that are hijacking whatever potential peaceful faith they might actually have.
Mm-hmm. Now, the world is pushing the Jews into mourning. Is it time for the Jews to come home to their homeland and build their third temple?
Well, these are two separate parts of a question, because the building of the third temple is something that we can all do every day, wherever we are in the world. We do it through our tefillot, our prayer. We do it through our actions, our mitzvot. We do it through every single effort we make to bring sparks of light into the darkness that is becoming our world. Is it time for Jews to come home? Absolutely. It's always been time. I am so beyond belief blessed that I live in the land in this time and that I have been in this home for 22 years, and living and breathing the holiness that is the land of Israel. I do believe it's time. I believe many Jews will find their way home. I also believe that there are two different kinds of what we call aliyah, which means the rising up. Because when you come to the land of Israel, it is believed we rise up and come home. We rise up because it is a holier place. This is all of Israel, Judea, Samaria, what otherwise is politicized as the West Bank, but is the home of our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah. This is our home. This is the home of Torah. Jews must come home. Some will come because they want to. Some will come because they have to. And that includes even the anti-Zionist Jews who believe that they will be able to save themselves from hate by saying it's Israel's fault. This is wrong. And anyone who has been led to believe that Israel has committed a genocide or even a single war crime does not know that our soldiers and our army and our land and our government, whatever you think of a certain politician, our laws are based on the laws of Torah, and the laws of Torah are the foundation of Christianity. And those laws of Torah are the foundation of all good civilization throughout history. And so therefore, we absolutely have an obligation to make sure more of the world realizes this. And that includes everybody.
Mm-hmm. Have other things, other bad things happened on this day, on Tisha B'Av?
Well, as a historian, I kind of spent a long time making sure to research all these different events. And the number becomes immense when you reach the years of the Holocaust in particular, and also different years around Tisha B'Av when terror attacks were taking place in the land of Israel. I can only share with you the stories that I have inherited of those who witnessed that under so many different circumstances in the ghettos, in the concentration and extermination centers, after the death marches, when they, when they went from place to place to place. So many spoke about what Tisha B'Av meant for them, how it was experienced in the places of darkness, how they couldn't have texts. It was forbidden to have Hebrew texts, so they relied on tidbits of memory. There were so many instances of destruction and so many glimmers of light that came from within it. So I encourage people to seek out another story, see what this day could mean even for you, Jewish, not Jewish, it doesn't matter. If the temple, which once stood in Jerusalem, was the symbol of peace and harmony for all mankind, and that is what it is written in our scriptures. My house will be open and all will come for all of the peoples of the world. The essential idea of Judaism is that here is God, and God welcomes everyone, and therefore the Jewish house of God was a place that welcomed all mankind. That is what we should be all striving for and teaching and making sure that others are hearing so that they too can refute the lies being spread about Jews, the demonization of Jews, the demonization of Israel. Stopping it starts with each of us.
What is your prayer for this time of mourning?
I think that there is, unfortunately, a lack of knowledge. People are used to sound bites and shorts and reels and good memes. My prayer would be that more people would continue a search for understanding and information about history. When someone learns about the history of the 9th of Av and the Jewish presence in Jerusalem, they no longer can accept any of the lies that negate the Jewish rights to the land. I believe that Tisha B'Av is essential. There are many days throughout the year that can also enforce that historical relevance. Our Declaration Day is one of them, and then again in May 14th. And you have so many in the British history, of course, November 2nd, the day of the Balfour Declaration. These are our opportunities, and even upcoming League of Nations on July 24th. These historical dates in modern history are as essential as the 9th of Av in ancient history. And we actually have in the Jewish calendar, we know the days when the temple stones were first laid. We know the days when the priests were in the temple and what days of the week certain things happened in the temple courtyard, that area that is now considered Al-Aqsa, which it is not. It is not all Al-Aqsa. This is a mistake, and you need to be able to learn more. That is my prayer, that more people will seek to learn, to know, and then maybe we can heal some of the fractured world Tisha B'Av represents.
What's your website for people who'd like to know more?
At israelforever.org, you can find a wealth of resources and information that emphasizes Israel's multidimensional reality. It's not just a state that dominates the news, even though we are less than 0.2% of the world's population. There you can explore our heritage, our peoplehood, activities, recipes, but more importantly, on our social feed, this is where you get your engagement, your advocacy, your resources that you can share onward. So I'm going to most encourage you not only to sign up on our website as a virtual citizen of Israel, but to come and follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, follow us on all the platforms so that you can be a part of spreading the truth. You must do more if you want to be a part of saving the world. That's my prayer, that more people see that we all have that responsibility.
Well, Elana, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you so much. And I will add one last prayer here, which is that we shall never have to mourn another destruction like Tisha B'Av and October 7th again, because many are not aware that Israel has discovered many different series of plans for October-style invasions, specifically on our northern border. And so we have to think of how many destructions have been prevented simply by the existence of a Jewish state and the presence of Jewish security forces known as our soldiers. I really want to encourage everybody to think about how we can prevent the destruction, because they say that when the Messiah comes, when Mashiach comes, the days of mourning, Tisha B'Av, will be turned into a day of joy. And I want to just close with that quote from what I was mentioning about Napoleon, that I realize now I forgot to close the story because it's essential. Napoleon sees the Jews mourning, and he sees them crying so far away from the land of Israel that they'd never even visited. And he says, a people like this is most deserved of being returned to their ancestral homeland. So when you want to be an advocate for truth, for the Jewish nation and for Israel, Tisha B'Av is a beautiful opportunity to do so. May you all be blessed in your daily lives, and may all of our work be holy.
And thank you for sharing today.
Thank you.